campus. His dozens of volunteers are the ones who make the ministry possible. This video is long, but I'm not sorry because it is packed with a bunch of helpful content. I've included links to the different topics within this video in the description below for your quick reference and navigation. Let me know your favorite takeaways from this video in the comments section. What ideas you learned from this video will you implement at your church? Without further ado, here's my interview with Scott Pease, production team lead at Red Rocks Church Littleton campus. Today, I am excited to have with me Scott Pease. He is the production team lead at Red Rocks Church here at the Littleton campus in Littleton, Colorado. And today, we are going to talk about how to build and how to lead a production team at a church. So before we get started talking about all the practicalities of building and leading a production team, Scott, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your story, your background, how you got into ministry, and how you got involved in production at Red Rocks Church.
Yeah, so I think the first experience I had in church was in high school. I was a part of setting up like kind of a youth group. I guess a little bit before that, my buddy had a buddy in high school who his dad was a pastor of a small church, about 200 people in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and he kind of kept pushing to get me involved, or like even just to come on the weekend. And my parents got involved with that church and became family friends. And I went, and I was really into music at the time. So the band is what kind of kept me there. And I had no idea that a church could have like a concert venue style, like PA system and consoles and into attending. I started to join in. I wanted to join in on the worship team and play electric guitar because that's what I was really into at the time. But I was always really interested in like recording and live sound kind of stuff. So throughout high school, I kind of kept attending this church and I played guitar, volunteering for a while. And then I graduated high school and decided that if I wasn't going to be able to go to this church, I didn't want to go to church anymore. But I still had my beliefs and I still had God in my heart. I just wasn't really going to church. So fast forward 4 years of not going to church, my buddy got back in touch with me. I started going to school. It all to him because the timing of everything was just so perfect. So I got back in touch with him randomly. We happened to run into each other, and he said, "Hey, we're starting this like young adults community. Would you like to be a part of this?" And I said, "Man, I haven't been to church in forever, but I do need to run sound somewhere." So I said, "Of course, I'll come to your meetings and I'll see what's going on." And he thought for sure he wanted me to join the worship team. And at this point, and I went and joined the tech team, and it was pretty much me and this other guy. And I wanted to run sound, so I went that path. And I started running sound for them, and that ended up turning into running sound for the Sunday weekend experience at Big Church. And yeah, I did that for quite a while. I started out as every other week, and then it became a thing where they really liked what I was doing, and they had me on every week. And yeah, it just kind of led to that. Now I started to kind of get a little bit burnt out. I was just a super volunteer kind of thing. I was doing the weekends, I was doing young adult kind of stuff, and it was a lot. Right out of college, I didn't really have a job, and I just didn't know what God was trying to call me to do in the midst of all this. Was it like trying to get on staff at this church, even though they didn't really have a huge role for this staff position. Um, so I met my wife through this a little bit of time at this community church. She had been going to Red Rocks since it was probably 50 people. Her brothers were a big part of some of the first people to come to this church, and so when I met her, we had been dating for a couple weeks, and she had said, "Hey, why don't you try to get on an every other week basis so that you can come to Red Rocks with me?" And I was very nervous. I didn't know how I felt about big churches, and at this time, this church had two campuses. They had one in Golden and one in Littleton. And she said, I did the give go serve thing where I went. They took 500 people from our Golden campus to start our Littleton campus, and she was one of those that volunteered to go serve there. And so I went with her. She said I hadn't been there in a while, and I sat in the back corner and I had my eyes on the tech booth the whole time, and I got wrecked. First time there, I didn't even know that this is what church could be like. The sermon really spoke and ministered to my heart, and gosh, fast forward just not even a couple months, through a family friend, Carson. He's a video production head at, or the team lead, I guess, at Red Rock Church, and he contacted me and asked me if I could do some sound for a video they were working on. And I said, God told me to say yes to this position, and I was super nervous about it. I hadn't had one gig out of high school that kind of paid me for doing audio, and I did it. I said yes, and that led to a week later, he called me up again and said, "Hey, we've got this opportunity. We're starting a transition campus to our Lakewood campus, where we're asking the same thing. We want 500 people to go serve and start this, what was to be our Lakewood campus, but was a transition in the process while it was being built." So he asked me if I wanted to be sort of a tech person for this campus. It was going to start out being part-time, and then could go into full-time, but we didn't really know what that looked like at the time. But the Lord also said, you should take this position. So I did. I remember sitting in the back of the Littleton campus the first service and said, "Lord, how do I work here?" And he had a little bit roundabout way of getting me back to Littleton, but I'm now the tech director at Littleton. So I started out at our Denver-based location. It was kind of in our downtown area. Just a small location they had bought for a Denver campus that actually didn't turn out to be a Denver campus. So just some things didn't work out. But I was there for about five months, and then helped build a little volunteer team there to help transition into our Lakewood campus once it was done being built. I ran the Lakewood campus tech for, I guess, from February until August of like 2015, and then I've been at Littleton from August until now. So God just took me around the horn of Denver at our campuses, and now I'm back at Littleton.
That's an awesome story. It just shows like what cool things can happen when you consistently, faithfully, serve, and just kind of give your best.
Yeah.
Just these cool opportunities just kind of keep coming, especially at places that just they're kind of like there's so many great opportunities at really fast growing churches like Red Rocks. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, because I'm going to ask you what your role actually looks like, because the word production team lead, like what in the world does that actually mean? But I actually want to kind of dive in real quick and just sort of clarify like the word production in general. I actually looked up a dictionary definition of it, because some folks I think get a little nervous when they hear the word production in church associated with each other. Like, oh man, your Sunday mornings, like, they shouldn't be a production. Like, it's just a worship service.
Yeah.
That objection seems very, very common one that I hear. And when you look up the roots of the word, I'm gonna Google real quick definition of production. I'm gonna just Google that real quick. When you look up the word, it describes the act of making or manufacturing something, or the process of financial and administrative management involved in making a movie, play, or record. And then you look at like the origin of the word. It actually comes from producere, the Latin word, which means bring forth. So it's really like this act of whether maybe you're bringing forth a movie, maybe you're bringing forth a product, you manufacture stuff, and I think in the terms, just to kind of like get this kind of clarified before we dive into talking about the church and worship setting. I think it's more about like we are bringing forth really what the worship experience and the worship gathering and like the organization of that on that every Sunday. So I don't think it necessarily needs to have. I think it's unfortunate sometimes production in the church world has this sort of icky connotation to it, but it's really important. And I think the church all throughout the past 2,000 years of its history has had some form of production. But maybe back in 500 years ago, Thomas Craner came out with a production tool called the Book of Common Prayer. I think it just looks different. It looks, maybe people back then were like, oh my gosh, you have a book that tells you what to pray and say throughout a service. Things that we think are old school, but were super innovative back then. But now we have these new tools like Planning Center. Then we have all this technology of our computers and our lighting systems and our sound systems. And they're all working together to help create and really, like we said, produce or bring forth a compelling environment in which God's people can gather and worship God, and experience discipleship through the service, and really be the church. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. I don't know, you and I never really specifically dove that deep, but I hope that helps some people who are listening or watching understand that if you have a production team, like you don't have to feel like you're copping out to the ways of the world or something like that.
Definitely not.
So let's dive in a little bit more. What does your role look like then as the production team lead at Red Rocks Church?
Yeah, starting out, like I said, this job started as a part-time position. I think I was hired to be a weekend producer. That was my role. And coming from that small community church,
And maybe explain or unpack what the weekend producer, what that means.
Yeah, I'll get into that. But starting out as a audio guy at a small community church with limited gear, they started to implement this thing they were calling a producer. Now, we had maybe a pro presenter, operator, the audio guy, and a guy that he needed to hit record on the camera. They were just starting to put their church services online, and a guy that would turn certain lights on at certain times, so making sure that the main speaker was lit at a particular time, or the worship leaders were lit. So it was very basic, and they wanted to implement this person called the producer while I was there, and I did not understand that at all. I was like, I know what I need to do. I'm pretty sure this guy over here knows what he needs to do. I don't know that we need a guy in the back telling us what we need to do. It just kind of seems silly to me. Yeah. So when I got hired for Red Rock Church as a weekend producer, it was kind of funny that I thought back to that and was like, interesting, I'm going to be this guy. And so a weekend producer for me meant that I would know the church service order very well in detail of what was happening and when it needed to happen, and who needed to make that happen. So Red Rock Church is a very production-heavy church. We have a lot of lighting, we have a lot of haze, we have a big PA, we've got digital audio consoles, we've got multiple pro presenter computers to do lyrics on multiple screens at the same time. We have video production. It's just a very big package of things that each person needs to know what they're doing and when to do it. So my main role, and in the very beginning, it was very simple. I had a lighting guy, an audio guy, and a pro presenter. And so what I needed to do was make sure that during the week, I would go through and prep things for each volunteer to come in and run. And basically, a weekend producer would sit there in the middle of kind of everybody